Joining me on stage now for the next panel, which is Shaping the Future of Global Brands, we have Kevin Dunkley returning. You probably saw him earlier on. He's Chief Sustainability Officer at HH Global. We also have Alice Ashbittle, Head of Sustainability at Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula One team. We have Sarah McDonald, VP Sustainability at Halion. And we have Beth Bovis, Partner Global Sustainability Lead at Kearney. Well, welcome our panel. Thank you. Okay, let's kick things off here. So, who shall I pick on? Alice, I think. Alice, tell us about the key sustainability initiatives that your brand has implemented in the past year.
Perfect. So we're really focused on tackling our biggest sources of carbon emissions as a priority. Formula One have a net zero by 2030 target, and we've also got a target for 2030 and also a climate pledge target by 2040 for net zero. So what we wanted to do was look at the biggest sources of our emissions and really commit to taking direct action in those immediately. And we've done that in kind of three key ways. So Formula One, one of our biggest impacts is the way in which we travel to races, so freight and logistics. So we've done a lot of work around investing in sustainable aviation fuel, both through a book and claim model, but also into direct refinery capacity to help reduce our emissions today, but also grow the market to help develop this really important technology. We're also looking at commuting, which is something that you probably don't think about, Formula One and commuting, but we are based in Brackley, for those of you who are from the UK. It's a small market town, and it doesn't have a train station, it doesn't have bus services, so actually a big impact is how our people come to work at our factory every day. So we've been implementing a lift sharing scheme and really looking at how we can cut those emissions and empower people not only to engage in environmental sustainability, but social sustainability by kind of creating new connections, improving well-being. And we're also looking at things like sustainable fuels around our European race trucks. So we drive the equipment around Europe, and we've been investing really heavily over the past 3 years into HVO 100. And we were able to achieve a 67% reduction in our emissions last year, and we're targeting 100% coverage of HVO in the European season this year. So some kind of nice big emissions.
Yeah, there's some big figures in there, big figures in that answer. Sarah, same question to you.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with all things carbon, given it's Climate Week, so it'd be kind of rude not to. So we've got goals to decarbonise all of our sites. We have 24 manufacturing sites around the world, and also to reduce our carbon emissions across our value chain, source to sale, by 42% by 2030. And we've made some big progress on that. So from a Scope 1 and 2 perspective, we got to 100% renewable electricity actually in 2022. And what we've been focusing on since is expanding the amount of on-site directly generated capacity that we've got, and also the amount of additional solar capacity that is attributable to us. So we've got a site not far from here, outside Oak Hill, and with Ameresco we did a partnership to build a solar farm to give that site 80% of its renewable electricity needs. And then what's been kind of cool, given we're talking about brands, is that we've then had an opportunity to storytell around that with consumers. So one of the things we were able to do off the back of the work with the Oak Hill site was use that decarbonisation to qualify the products made there with Amazon to get their Amazon Climate Pledge friendly badge, and that's really helping engage our consumers because they know that they can easily filter for and buy a more carbon friendly toothpaste when they want to brush their teeth.
And Beth, same question to you.
Yeah. Absolutely. So Kearney, for those who don't know, is a consulting firm, or a professional services firm. And so when we look at the initiatives that we do in this space, they take two spots. What do we do as a company to be authentic in the space? And then what do we do to be a force multiplier in the space? So this year for ourselves, we've already achieved, we're very happy to have achieved our Scope 1 and 2 targets, but no spoiler, that wasn't that hard because almost all of our emissions are Scope 3. And so really to get the behavior change, we've done two things. One is investing heavily in sustainable aviation fuel. As you can imagine, that's the biggest driver. And the second is to implement internal carbon pricing, and we're looking at internal carbon budgeting to be able to bring forward recognition. But fixing our Carbon and sustainability is only a small part of what we can do. So we also launched this year the Kearney Sustainable Materials Institute, which is designed to curate all of the materials and polymers and things that you all are discovering, putting them in a place so that when a head of supply chain says, gee, I would love to be more sustainable, but what can I replace this material with? How can I build this product differently? That they have a source to go to. And in a similar vein, launching this week a review of all the climate tech startups and say who's ready to scale at the Fortune 500 level. So there's tons of startups out there. We want to invest and build all of you, but there are some that are ready to scale and could be solutions for corporate America and corporate Europe and global corporate. But we need to know which ones, most people don't have visibility, which one's ready, who's really capable. So together with Silicon Foundry, we have reviewed over 10,000 climate tech startups and come up with the 100 that we think are ready to go.
That's great. I love this positive start to the conversation about what we've all achieved in the last year. Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, we're a services business, so we don't make anything. So we're working through our net zero transition planning, and what jumps out is the products that we buy on behalf of our clients, marketing-related products. So what they're made of, how many of them, the materials, the circularity of them, or the non-circularity of them, and then the supply chain, which is extensive, 6,500 suppliers worldwide, how they make those products, so energy. So they're the two things that are key to our targets. We don't control either of them, which is the interesting thing. We control travel and energy, tiny. It's the products, so circularity, conscious creative. We launched a program to sort of educate designers and creatives internally and externally around, did you understand the decisions you make are responsible for 80% of the environmental footprint of the thing you're designing? And that's a work in progress, but going pretty well. And then working out with the supply chain at scale around education, decarbonisation, which is the big buzzword this week, but easy to say, hard to do. One interesting thing, which I won't name the organisation, but there's a financial institution that are saying to us, we have capital. If you can join the dots between the capital and your supply chain, we are looking at offering preferential green financing to the big suppliers. So that's quite a moment, which if we could make that happen would be exciting.
Okay. Now, this is a question we've asked a lot of people already today, but it won't stop me from asking it again. Beth, maybe you can go first here. How do you integrate sustainability goals into your overall business strategy?
So it starts with me and my role, and we cascade. So my role as global sustainability leader means I'm not just responsible for the carbon footprint and the social impact of Kearney, but I'm actually responsible for every offering we put into the consulting marketplace, having a lens of sustainability and bringing sustainability into there, because we believe we're a force multiplier. And so by blending those roles and not separating them, we are trying, and we're not 100% there yet, but we're trying to signal that that it isn't about having a sustainability strategy, but a strategy that's sustainable. And it isn't about having a sustainability business over on the side that I take care of, but more having our business bring fundamental principles of sustainability into the marketplace.
Same for you, actually, Alice.
So I think I really echo. I think it's all about, Formula One is about innovation and going fast. And when you think about what we need to do to respond to the climate challenge, it's innovate and go fast. And so it is embedded into every decision that we now take and make, and that lens of sustainability, and it's top down, bottom up integration. It's far more than just the sustainability team. It's about empowering everyone in the business to look at everything they're doing and take that innovative mindset. We've got a lot of problem solvers, a lot of people who love a challenge, and kind of framing the challenge we have around sustainability for them in that way really inspires change. I've had someone from our gearbox team reach out to me and go, how can I make this process more efficient around plastic waste? And I think that giving them that challenge and kind of asking them, come to us with your ideas, we're here to enable rather than dictate, I think has really, really embedded that process.
And I think, Formula One is one of those sports where it's all about marginal gains, right? And if you can do like 0.5% or 0.1% even, it can make such a crucial difference. So is that how you also approach your sustainability?
Exactly. Yeah, we really believe in sustainable high performance, and that those two things do not conflict. It's all about efficiency, and that's what we need to achieve. So actually framing it in that mindset is really powerful.
Partnerships is another word that's been mentioned a lot today, and we know how important partnerships are when we're trying to achieve these goals. Sarah, can you shed some light on this maybe? Give us an example of a successful partnership, and you don't have to name the organisation, but you can give us some clues that you've worked with and really helped to drive your sustainability forward.
Yeah, sure. If I can, I'm going to be cheeky and give two.
Of
One
course.
that is around helping us achieve the goals, and then one that's around helping us engage people and consumers in what we're doing. So in terms of helping us achieve our goals, we do a lot of work, and I will name them because they're happy for me to do so, with Schneider Electric in terms of moving to using renewable electricity. And we're doing that not just for our own move, because we've got to 100% renewable electricity or Helion now, but in January this year, we launched a sustainable supply chain pledge, where we're asking our upstream suppliers that account for 60% of our carbon emissions to do the same. And we're making that ask, but also giving support. So Schneider's there to help upstream suppliers move to renewable electricity, accessing power purchase schemes close to them, for example. So that's been a really successful partnership in helping us drive decarbonisation. And then on the other hand, we know that our consumers really want to buy more sustainable products, but it's not that easy to know how to do it or which is the more sustainable one. So we do a lot of partnerships with our retail partners like Walmart, Amazon, Target, and so on in activating in store and just making it super simple. And one of the ones I love is, many of you in the US might know the Advil brand, that's really tough on kind of sorting out your headache if you've got a sore head. And we've done some great activations in store talking about tough on pain, not on the planet, and just with really simple messaging about how the packaging is more sustainable, how that saves carbon and so on. And that's helping engage people in giving them one less headache to worry about.
That's nice. And now, obviously, marketing is your forte, of course, Kevin. I mean, do you think that we need to change the way that we're having this conversation and some of the terms? I mean, you alluded to this in your previous session as well. Do we need to use more straightforward language when it comes to talking about sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a bit of a passion now. I'm in the room with, leading sustainability people, and we're in a bit of an echo chamber sometimes talking about this stuff, and you've got to remember who you're talking to. And that's why I think collaborating with marketing and creative people in your organisation or outside to demystify it. I mean, I used to be a CIO, and IT people have the same issue. They're talking in these terms which you can only describe as jargon and gobbledygook, and they're happy in that world, but nobody else knows what they're talking about. I'm seeing a bit of that in sustainability, so we need to take it down a level or two. I'll give you an example. Part of the net zero standard about reducing carbon is investing in credible nature-based programs. They don't say that. They say beyond value chain mitigation projects. What does that mean? I mean, who knows? So investing in nature-based programs is a much easier way. So we're doing it all the time, and the acronyms that we're getting, just, losing people on the journey.
Yeah. Who doesn't love an acronym? Beth, I'm going to come back to you. Back to the partnerships question, actually. Tell us about another instance or an example where you've had a successful partnership that's helped you achieve your goals or moved you along that journey.
Yeah, and not to shift us totally away from decarbonization, but since those were such great examples, we've been doing a lot of partnerships with associations and NGOs in the social impact space to really look at how we bring the lens of return on investment from that nomenclature into the social impact space, to think about social return on investment and how do we fund and flow our resources and the world's resources into the programs that will most benefit society. And so the huge amount of money that goes in that space, including for us, we have our pro bono work and the work that we do in there. So we apply this both internally and externally to work with various organizations to look at how does investing in housing change health outcomes? And can we not just say it in a feel-good way, but can we say it in an economic way, that if a city invests in housing, here's the economic return to the city of having made that investment, and how can we use some of the, I'll call it the traditional language of business, to actually express the language of sustainability and SDGs. And so we've been doing that work in partnership with a number of NGOs and a number of associations in various cities. So the one I'll name is a shout out to the American Medical Association, who's letting us work with them on the efforts that they put forth in the communities in Chicago to look at the impact on health and economic prosperity in that city from making investments in businesses and housing in communities that are struggling.
Alice, your organisation, should we call it, is all about partnerships. It's very publicly a partnership, and very high profile as well. Do you think that helps because there is that visibility and these names are against what you're doing rather than working with partners who are maybe hidden in the background?
I love talking about partnerships and sustainability because I just think it's so fundamental to achieving all of our targets, whether it's climate, biodiversity. And what I think is really powerful and what I love about our kind of partners is that we have such a diverse range of partners, from financial institutions to products and everything in between. And actually having that diversity of thought and having like really open and honest conversations and saying, what's the challenge you're facing? This is the challenge we're facing. There are so many synergies that we will find between us, and we've convened the partners and we've really discussed some of these challenges, and out of it we've found opportunities to collaborate. And I think the more you do that and the more that you look outside of your individual sector and actually go, I'm going to have lots of similarities with sectors I don't even think I will, there's a huge opportunity, and we've seen that across our stack.
So I'm just thinking who to ask the next question to. Kevin, this might be interesting. You might give us a sort of broader perspective on this. What metrics or KPIs do you think it's wise for companies to use or to adopt when they're measuring success when it comes to sustainability? And what does success look like?
I mean, from a macro point of view, we align with the SDGs. So if that's part of your strategy and you've aligned to that, then progress to those is something we measure, and that can be across social and environmental. It's also easy for people to understand. So a lot of our brands we work with do have alignment to the SDGs, and then plot their on track, behind target to that, which I think is useful because they're relatively straightforward to understand. There's a lot of detail there, but carbon and water and etc. I think at a more sort of a tinier level, I think behaviour change in the organisation is something I touched on earlier. We're working to sort of see how do we measure how much progress we're making as a business, moving it across the business. We've got people are incentivised against that now, so that'll be interesting to see which teams actually achieve their number and whatever their target is, whether it's the IT team measuring data centre energy use or the finance team doing carbon accounting and regulatory reporting. So there's the kind of ones you have to measure because it's a compliance issue, and then there's the ones macro level around SDGs. We find that's useful, easy to explain.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the carbon reporting is the obvious one. But I think trying to make it easy to understand for people, I'm stuck a broken record. We need to make it easier for people to understand. So the SDGs is a good one to align to and progress against that.
I imagine that everyone is doing that as well, but is anyone deviating from that? Has anyone got different methods or different KPIs, different strategies to measure this?
I think maybe just one thing to build on would be using external certifications as much as possible, because everyone gets quite cynical about greenwashing and, is that an apple and an apple, and can you compare them? So one of the things we try and do is wherever possible is use industry-wide recognised certifications, because it gives people confidence that what you're reporting on is done in the same way, measured in the same way, and people can trust it. So whether that's for sustainable sourcing using, well-known accreditations like FSC, PEFC, certified paper, for example, so everyone knows, yep, if it says that on the carton box of my toothpaste, I can feel confident it is. Or other certifications like that we find really helpful as a shortcut for all stakeholders, consumers, customers, but also our investors. They can be, it's a shorthand, yep, okay, got it, yeah, you're using the industry standard, that's helpful.
Do you think consumers can get a bit confused by that though? by some of those standards, again, it's acronyms. Do the consumers really understand what it means and what you have to do to achieve that kind of certification, what it actually stands for?
I think not. I don't think necessarily they know the nuts and bolts of it, but I think where it's a standard that's got a lot of visibility and traction, it gives you confidence. And I mean, I mentioned Amazon Climate Pledge before. I think that's another example of where retailers have stepped in to help make it easy for consumers, because then consumers know, well, the retailer's got a certain way that they score products, and your product either makes the cut or it doesn't. And that, I think, is another way where you can make it easier for consumers to feel confident. If I'm going to try and make the more sustainable choice, how do I know which one it is?
Okay, we talked earlier as well about supply chain sustainability and scope 3, and we know what a challenge that is. And obviously, you've probably got different experiences, like you said. If you're a service company, then it's all about your scope 3. But what specific challenges have you encountered? And maybe Beth, you can tackle this one. What challenges have you encountered, and obviously how did you overcome those when it comes to scope 3 and your whole supply chain?
So I'm gonna take the liberty to answer this question in two parts, because we did do a survey of COOs to ask them what challenges were they experiencing and getting after their sustainability of their supply chain, and 37% said we have a knowledge gap. We don't have visibility and the data and the information to even act, right? So we have a knowledge gap, and 34% said I can't prioritize. I've got 1,000 things that I can do. How do I'm struggling to prioritize, but only 20% said I don't have the money to do it. And now that's still 20%, but that's a big gap between there. And I think there's a myth out there that there isn't money to fund the transition, and it's not that it isn't expensive. But when we ask people what's really getting, it's the knowledge and the prioritization. What do I do first? And how do I know that what I'm going to do is going to move the needle a lot? And so some of that also applied to us as we looked at, like I said, flying on airplanes is the biggest driver. It drives 80% of our emissions is flying on airplanes. And we can do a lot of things to change how much we fly. We are looking at our business model and how we go to market and how we resource things. But at the end of the day, we said, what's really actually going to game change for us in supply chain is actually to go work in the airline industry and in the sustainable aviation fuel industry to help the industry itself change. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, some people are going to get on airplanes, and if those airplanes are more sustainable, then that is really the way, our path to our science-based target. So we kind of took a very proactive work with our suppliers approach on that side, because we know that unless there's a fundamental change in that industry, we ourselves as an organization will not be able to hit our science-based targets. So we said, rather than just point the finger and say, you're not doing it right, we said, we're going to go all in with you to help figure out how to make that right.
You mentioned aviation there, and my knowledge might be out of date here, but aren't data centers and AI a growing challenge here that produce more emissions than the aviation industry?
So they are a growing challenge, and obviously we're an information-based piece. We're lucky enough that as an organization, we made our pledge in 2006 to be carbon neutral, which is like long before then it became net zero. So because of that, most of our data center and our technology, we have initially on the front end partnered around renewable energy and other sources for that. So for us, we've been able to mitigate that, but that is a real challenge. But we happen to have gotten, I say lucky, with the great foresight of people who came before me to do that. So when we were making those investments, we were able to do it in facilities that had renewable energy.
Supply chain. I'm going to stick on supply chain here and scope 3. Alice, maybe you can tell us your experience here as well. Biggest challenges and how you're addressing those.
So I think we've got a couple of challenges. One of them is that we operate in a huge range of geographies. And so awareness of sustainability and kind of the top priorities are different in different geographies. Another one of the big one is aviation, to go back to that point, because I do think it is really important. And actually the way in which we've tackled aviation, be it through freight or through people travel, is upskilling and investing in sustainable aviation fuel, but really kind of trying to catalyse that market and also show others that through investment in this, there is a path to decarbonising aviation. And so kind of using our platform and actually, again, kind of echoing your point about kind of beyond our own impact, understanding, we call it the brain print that we have, because we have a lot of eyeballs on us every other weekend. You know, we talk about being like a Super Bowl size event every weekend. And so the ability to influence beyond our own activities is probably the biggest way, again, we can impact Scope 3 and drive emissions reduction, and being really transparent and acknowledging where we've made steps. So last year we were able to bring down our aviation emissions by over 6,000 tonnes through investment in SAFC, but there's still a lot of work to be done, and actually it's in how we scale and amplify that.
Can you put that into context for me? So you said 6,000 tonnes. Can you give me that in a percentage term?
So we talk about our race team control footprint, which is basically all of the emissions that take us from factory to flag and back again. Essentially everything apart from our purchase goods and services Scope 3 category. And that is around 17,000 tonnes. And so that kind of 6,000 tonnes, without doing the immediate mental maths on that, is a substantial chunk of our footprint. And we announced very recently that we're set to quadruple the volume of SAF emissions reduction that we're achieving by 2025 compared to 2022. So it's a real driver for us, and we're really committed to the industry.
Okay, thank you. I don't know, we did have someone in here earlier who could have given us some great insight into SAF. I can't see her in the room at the moment. But you know, SAF's been mentioned a couple of times here. Why are we having more SAF in aviation? Is it about production of SAF? Can anyone give me an answer? I know this isn't an area of expertise necessarily, but is it a case of we need production to increase and that brings prices down, that makes it more available? Because all the technology and the engines are perfectly capable of flying sustainable aviation fuel, right? So what's holding that back?
Production.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a supply-demand matching, right?
Yeah.
And there's a time lag. So if the demand isn't there, the cost to switch is real, right? It's an opportunity cost for a refiner to switch from traditional to sustainable fuel. So that is why what Alice is describing is so important, which is sending demand signals there so that the companies that are doing the production know that if they do make the switch, they will have the reliable revenue that will come from that. And that's a big part of what we try to work on is both making sure the capacity is there. So there's countries like Brazil where there's a lot of capacity getting ready to come online, which is fabulous, and will be helpful as well.
Okay. Sarah, in what ways has your company engaged with customers and stakeholders to promote sustainability, but also to sell the messaging of what you're doing? How are you sharing that message?
Yeah, I mean, because we're a consumer healthcare company selling brands that people buy every day, so brands like Advil, Sensodyne, Tums, Centrum, we've got a great opportunity to engage people through the packaging, through the in-store point of sale, through the comms we do, through the digital marketing, and we do that a lot. Now, we need to recognise, though, that when people reach for one of our products, what they first want it to do is solve the healthcare need that they're buying it for. So get rid of my headache, make my teeth not sensitive, whatever. And that's always going to be their number one priority. But what we found is when you bring a sustainability message together with that in a way that is very linked and on brand, it actually is a multiplier. And so rather than making two top efficacy claims, if you have an efficacy claim and a sustainability claim together, you actually get higher purchase intent uplift and sales uplift. So getting that evidence of what's the ideal combo of claims, because when you reach for an Advil, you probably don't necessarily want the sustainability message first, but having it's going to be tough on your pain and it's not tough on the planet is a good combination. So that's what we find in our area, is lead with the first thing people want and then supplement it with, and also this is how it's good for you from a planet point of view.
Right, so that literally makes people feel better and makes them feel better.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
I mean, Kevin, you're the marketing expert here. What do you think that brands maybe are getting slightly wrong, apart from the language that we're using, and maybe that's the language that we're using within CSO circles? But what could brands do differently, do you think, to shape their brands for a more sustainable, demanding consumer?
I think a lot of them are worried about sticking their head above the parapet. We've heard that from some of our clients, so we're B2B, but our clients are the consumer facing, and we've seen where you could dial up the sustainable benefits of a certain type of packaging or point of sale. Not so much the products itself, that's not where we play, but a lot of them are a little bit, and they call it green hushing, they're a bit nervous about being the first one in their space, their sector, to say, we're doing this. Glass is one where I think there's opportunities for some of the drinks companies to really dial up, sustainable glass, more recycled glass content. And the issue with that is it's not as clear as the normal glass, and it's like, well, you could use that as a platform to message with, and no one's really done that yet. So it feels like a lot of them are just waiting for the first one to take the step. So I think being a bit bolder, but I think it's the nervousness. There's always hundreds of people, we've all seen it on LinkedIn, jumping on brands and dragging them down because they're trying to do something. Lego's the famous one, isn't it? They've been very open and said, look, we're trying all these different alternatives to plastic. They're not working. They're getting a lot of love for that. But there's not. What other examples are there of people who are fessing up and saying this is hard? So I think there's a lot of nervousness. So I think be a bit more bold.
Yeah.
If you're honest about it, Lego didn't lose love over this, did they? They've actually got, by being authentic and saying this isn't really working yet, it's actually worked well for them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's something. I mean, that conversation's been rumbling on for years, hasn't it, about an alternative to plastic for Lego? And it's recently that they said, yeah, we can't do it. I think there was something in the news yesterday that said that California was banning the use of plastic bags, and this is something they'd done previously, I think, for single-use bags. But their solution was to come up with bags that were a lot thicker. And the idea was, if not a bag for life, then a bag that you would use 200 times, but no one did, of course. Consumers used it once and then chucked it in the bin. So now they're having to, again, say, okay, well, that didn't work, and they've got to change the policy. But you talked about brands being, braver and bolder. Do you think there's something holding them back, but is there more to be gained from taking that step?
Well, I think so. I mean, the talk comes out of the tech companies about failing fast, doesn't it? Fail often, fail fast. Are they really doing that? I mean, there's a lot of safe stuff going on, isn't there? And move fast and break things, isn't that meta? I mean, yeah, load of nonsense. They need to actually be a bit bolder. Maybe coming together. I mean, this is hard because it's there's competitors, but we almost need to get together with peers in a non-commercial space to try and drive things. I mean, new materials. I think there's something about aggregating some of these, back to the Lego thing. If you could find alternatives to plastic and get enough of it within a certain sector and industry, you could scale quicker. That back to your point about economies of scale. There's not enough of that going on. There is in the human rights area, bizarrely. The supply chain and human rights, there's an organisation called AIM Progress, which is all the FMCG brands. We're a part of that, but it's the Pepsis, the Cokes, they're all together. But we're not seeing it outside of that. I mean, there's some around the energy with the drinks companies and trying to aggregate energy. But around materials, I think there's an opportunity there. But we're wired to compete, aren't we? I mean, it just, you can feel it. You can feel it.
I can come in on that with an example. I think it's a good point on plastics and packaging and being bold and getting out of things altogether. So we've got a product called Flonase in the US that's an allergy brand, and it used to be packaged in a kind of plastic outer packaging, and recently we've got rid of that altogether and moved it into cardboard, which is really impactful and noticeable on shelf. And then it's actually also much better because you imagine you've got a plastic thing on the shelf, it reflects the light. So actually from a shelf impact point of view, moving it into cardboard is not only saving plastic, saving carbon, it's also improving the shelf impression. So I think having win-win examples like that is great. But to your point on collaboration, one of the other things we're doing is working as part of a collective. So we've got part of a bottle collective and a blister collective to investigate using cellulose, so paper-based packaging, as a container for medicines. So instead of having bottles or having blister packs, which are really difficult to recycle, getting into paper-based. But for that, it needs a big tech investment to get to paper that's got the level of barrier properties that are going to be enough to keep your healthcare products having the right quality safety parameters for a long time. So we've done that as an industry collective, going with others so we can share the development costs. So we haven't nailed it yet, but hopefully at some point we might have paper-based bottles of Advil, who knows, and paper-based blister packaging for some of our tablets.
Speaking on a personal or consumer level, do you think we make recycling too difficult and too complicated?
I think it doesn't help that it's different wherever you go around. So, I mean, wouldn't it be great if you just had like the same bin regime no matter where you lived? Yeah, I get lots of reactions to that. So I think it is unfortunate that there isn't a kind of universal scheme nationally where wherever you are, the same things can get recycled. You put them in the same color bin and that's it. So I do think that frustrates people because you're like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do with this. And it would be a lot simpler if we could just have kind of one size fits all. It would solve a lot of consumer frustration, I think.
Okay, do we have any questions from the audience before I move on to others? Yes, question at the back. Just 1 second while we get the microphone over to you. And if you can just remind us who you are again, please, before you ask your question. Thank you.
Hi, Dave Perillo from Dow. I was curious about something, Beth, that you said during your introduction, and you mentioned carbon budgeting.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you could tell us when that works and when it doesn't work well. And is it just an internal thing, or can it make a good brand connectivity?
So, sure, happy to. And like I said, it's something that we're toying with. Where, in our belief, where the issue of awareness and thoughtfulness is one of the barriers to making sustainable choices, we feel like carbon budgeting can put that value out there. So if I were to say to my recruiting team, you have X thousand tons of carbon to go recruit Y number of individuals globally for the firm, they would probably choose differently when they went on site to campus, when they did virtual. They would make they would have a different choices. And so that's what we're exploring, is saying, like, do we take it and budget it and look at it? We do think that it's not a cure-all, because ultimately, if I have to get on a plane to go somewhere, that plane, I can make a choice to sit in an economy seat instead of a first class seat. But beyond that, I have very little impact on that. I can look at the carbon footprint of the different airlines, but candidly, they're not that dramatically different from one another. So it only helps where you would choose different models because you are budgeting that out. And so in the parts of our world where that would make sense, that's what we would consider. In terms of your, could you use it beyond that, beyond an internal piece? I will only share my personal opinion, which is I think that there's a double-edged sword with that, because you can get into a scenario where people are like, well, I have excess, and so therefore I'm going to use it up, right? Or where people, depending externally, where customers, if they don't care, it may not, in essence, advance the agenda. And so when we've looked at this, we've had customers say, well, I'd be happy to pay for your carbon offsets because I want you to do something unsustainable. Well, that isn't really great for the conversation. Just say, like, oh, now you've told me, okay, I'm happy to pay for those offsets. Well, maybe that's not the reaction I wanted. Maybe I wanted a co-creation about how we lower them. So I think that's where it's kind of it depends. If you can get in a co-creation conversation, I think it can be really helpful to say, here's the budget, how do we redesign how we work together against this budget? That's really helpful. If you're in a conversation where it's like, okay, well, I'll help you offset the cost of that, then that's not a net gain. It might still be beneficial to your P&L, but it doesn't actually change the planet's outcome.
Yes, take one more question down here, please. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ashmira. I'm with PepsiCo. I have two questions, one for Beth and for Alice. How much is sustainable aviation fuel costing in order to offset those emissions? And then for Sarah, how's your company influencing consumer behavior? So when you do have those sustainability claims, which may make the product more expensive, you don't find your consumers just reaching for maybe the generic brand or something on the shelf that is cheaper?
you want to start, Alice?
I will, and I guess the first thing to say is sustainable aviation fuel certificates are an uplift on traditional aviation. So it is an investment that we make, and the pricing is very varied. So it really depends on quality, and so we're really committed to sourcing the highest quality product, because we need to be careful that in accelerating this market, we're not accelerating a problem around deforestation or palm oil, for example. So actually having really rigorous sourcing standards are really important for us around kind of certification. There are some great guides out there from the Clean Skies for Tomorrow Coalition, and kind of actually looking at what are your minimum thresholds, and then that kind of sets the price. And then it's so volatile at the moment with mandates coming in and kind of seeing a great kind of policy drive for this, but it makes the voluntary market very unclear at the moment. And so there is a bit of bravery in kind of engaging in this space as well, and acknowledging it's a voluntary step to take.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would build on is that we've been trying to do some of our purchasing in concert with specific airlines and airline consortiums to be supportive of their efforts to use it, and sending the signal that we would be willing to pay more for our flights in order to do that. But we've made the choice not to pass that cost on, right? So we're taking that cost on ourselves to make the transition over here too, in terms of what do our customers feel in terms of that. We take that cost on ourselves.
Yeah, so I'll recap your question. You tell me whether I've remembered it right, having listened to the discourse on SAF. I think you were asking, how do we engage consumers in actions we're taking, and do we find a problem from a pricing point of view? If it comes through in the price, do they then switch to a cheaper alternative? So look, I think at the end of the day, consumers kind of want it all. They want products that are really effective, that are accessible and there for them when they need them. So all the kind of normal rules of marketing apply, and they would like them to be more sustainable as well. So I think you have to be very careful about the extent to which you pass on cost into price, particularly in the current climate with cost of living crisis and so on. People are very price sensitive, so we have to be very careful with that. Having said that, I would say, Haleon is lucky to have really industry-leading, well-known brands that people love and trust, like Advil, that they've used for many years. They know it's going to work to sort out their headache. It's a brand that they're very familiar with, and so those brands are able to command a premium compared to generics because they are trusted. They offer a benefit. They typically get to work faster. They've got other benefits that mean people prefer them. They're easier to swallow, and all those good things. So I think I wouldn't say that there's that people are more willing to pay more for sustainability. I think we've got to be a bit careful for that. I think that where it works best is when you bring it through into benefits, into the kind of real benefits of why people buy the product in the first place, and make that link, like I was saying before. So, it might sound a bit cheesy, but like the Advil example, tough on plane, not on the planet, it's like one less headache to worry about, is that actually that's very intuitive. And people are worried about, am I doing the right thing? So I think finding that link, leading with the core reason why, the category driver of why people buy the product in the first place, and then linking to that, is something that we found works really well.
Okay, thank you for your question. Just to wrap things up, let's look into the future. We've talked a lot about what we're currently achieving and challenges that we're facing. Kevin, how do you see the role of sustainability evolving in the next 5 years, let's say, for global brands?
You mean the role of the sustainability team, or
the importance of sustainability for those brands?
Oh, well, I'm going to say it's going to get more important. We were talking in the preamble, weren't we, around the pushback, particularly here in the US. We're not seeing that so much in Europe, I don't think, but you were saying, Beth, that there is some evidence of it here. I think the ESG term, will disappear. I think it arrived, didn't it? And it's interesting when you're in a room with financial services, it's used a lot, but outside of that, people are talking about sustainability and responsibility. So I think you might see that disappear. We don't need this politicised, it's too important, isn't it? So I think it's going to be high on the agenda for the foreseeable. I think it just will be.
Yeah.
I can't see any alternative.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think it's going to continue to be very important and rising in importance in spite of some of the external discourse you hear, because we see more consumer pull every time we look at the consumer data. The stats are going up in terms of what people want and what they're worried about. I think it's also because people are feeling the impact really personally. So if you look at how much climate change has risen up people's personal concern, it's because they're feeling it themselves. They've been impacted by a heat wave. They've been told to not go outside because of a wildfire, air pollution, or something's personally happened to them that means, it's not just like an out there problem for the world. It's like, this is impacting me and I want to do something about it. So we don't see any reduction in consumer pull, quite the opposite. And then when it comes to the big customers and retailers we work with, all of them have got big agendas of their own and targets they need to reach, and they expect us to lean in to help them deliver them, and they want to engage their shoppers in that because their shoppers want it and they want to make it easy for them. And then you've got the regulatory pressure, which is off the scale. There's this tsunami of acronyms coming at us that we need to get ready for from a regulation and reporting point of view, and that's driving a lot of attention on this. And investors may be being quieter, to your green hushing point, but I spend a lot of time speaking to investors, and as a new, recently separated company, we spend a lot of time speaking to investors, and it's really important for them because, one, they are coming under pressure themselves around the profile of their investments, and there's a lot more rigor going into sustainable investing because it has perhaps not been as rigorous as it might have been, so they're under the cosh for that. But also, it's a way of them knowing that they're making an investment in a company that is cognizant of its risks and managing them well. And that's a big driver of why investors care. It's like, do you understand your exposure to climate change? Do you understand your exposure to water risks? How it might affect your supply chain? Are you managing that well? That's why they're interested. And given everything that's happening in terms of people's exposure to adverse weather events, this, that, and the other, I think that's only going to get stronger.
So to try and find something different to say in that space, but kind of echo those things, I think super exciting to see the kind of commitment to the SDGs and a real kind of acceleration of that's come out of this week already, and kind of see that go. I think that's going to be super important for sustainability in the next 5 years around kind of responding to the global challenge and seeing actions really kind of being tied to that. I think also the upcoming workforce is another really interesting challenge. We are seeing that green jobs and green skills can command a premium, and actually there's a really exciting kind of diverse talent base waiting to come in and bring those skills. So I actually see it that the sustainability teams will become every person within an organization. Actually, we're starting to see this real kind of drive and passion from all areas and aspects. So I actually feel very optimistic about what that will do and kind of where that will go.
Beth, final words.
Yeah, great things. I would just double down on what Alice just said and what everybody said. I think in the next 5 years, you're going to see this become just how you run business, because there are not other choices, and that's very exciting. Will it be 100% everywhere all the time? I'm not quite that optimistic, but I do think you'll start to see that shift from it as a silo to a function. And I also think in 5 years, if you think about people who will enter the workforce between now and 5 years, both there's the skill aspect, but there's also the demand aspect. And talent already is flowing away from industries and organizations that aren't talking about SDGs. And I think that talent war will continue in at least the Western Hemisphere as we go, and probably the global North. And the global South maybe a bit more than 5 years to get there.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Kevin, Sarah, Alice, and Beth. Thank you.